Welcome to Let's Talk. Today we are graced with Jessica Coleman from the City Attorney's Office. She's the Assistant City Attorney to Carol Duncan, who is our City Attorney. And they do so many things with every department of the city that we thought we'd have Jessica tell us a little bit about it. Attorneys, Jessica, you have a lot of stuff that you can't talk about, right?
Sure. I mean, it's a little different when you work for a city, right? Because everything's kind of more open, and we don't really have a client per se like a lot of attorneys do. So a lot of what we do is more open than your traditional attorney.
But take us through, now I know there's no such thing as a typical day, because if there's no such thing as a typical day in my job, there's really no such thing as a typical day in yours. But you do court some days.
Right. Here in Jonesboro, we have district court trials on Monday and Wednesday mornings. Carol and I split that. Carol usually does Monday, and I usually do Wednesday. Sometimes that changes. And we also have circuit court at times, whether it's criminal appeals from district court, or yesterday I had a hearing that involved one of the civil cases the city has going on. I did that in circuit court yesterday afternoon. But that's really a very small portion of our job when you look at the wide array of things we deal with on a daily basis. Court's just one of the more consistent things we get to deal with on a regular basis.
The thing that has struck me in 1 year and a half of working in government is there are so many laws and so many people working in government and who, even with the best of intentions, may run into a legal situation. And sometimes you catch those ahead of the problem, and sometimes you catch those a couple of steps into the problem. Can you, dig into the past a little bit and maybe give us an example, without naming names, of something where of a time when you had to say, hey, this is something we recognize we need to get into, help you straighten this out, and make sure we're on top of it?
On a good day, right, you're right, we catch it ahead of time. We fix it, we figure it out, we nip it in the bud. But often that's not what happens, right? Like sometimes we don't find out about it till we're in the middle of it, and there's become a problem. And then Carol and I get the phone call. A lot of times Carol gets to deal with a lot of that, because that's what happens when you're the woman in charge. But often it's a group effort in our office, what we do. I'm trying to think of a specific something. It's an interesting job because, you know, we often have police issues because we prosecute the misdemeanors here in Jonesboro. But it's not unusual for us to get a cemetery question one day and then parks the next day, and FOI requests that we get all the time that are time consuming and take time. God, we deal with so much. I can't think of anything specific we got in the middle of, and we're like, oh gosh, this is a problem, which is crazy because I know it happens with regularity just because there's so much. But I can't think of anything specific. But maybe I can think of it when we come back to it.
Well, the one thing you help me with a lot is freedom of information requests, and they are an endless stream of public requests. But the bottom line is they're open records. We deal in transparency. You guys are very good at making sure that we provide any records that are open, that are legally responsible to be open. Our mayor is very adamant that he wants to run his business transparently. And my job is to make sure we get all those together. But when it comes to all the legal details of getting those things, I have to come to you guys, because you know what has to be redacted for privacy's sake, and precisely what is public record and what is redacted. Can you tell people a little bit about what is public and what's not public?
Sure. The general view in our office that Carol takes, which is kind of the way we initially analyze any request we get, is it's releasable unless there's an exception that says it's not. So in the city specifically, anything in writing that you do within the city is going to be typically releasable, whether it's emails or any written communication within the city, or any communications we receive. I think that's something some citizens don't realize too. Any complaints they make to the city in writing, or any emails you send to someone who works within the city, can be releasable. Some of the common things that we don't release is going to be any kind of personal information. You don't get to get someone's home address, social security number, dates of birth. Another common thing is if someone asks off work and takes a sick day, that's releasable, but why they take a sick day is not. The public doesn't get to know if somebody in your family is sick, or if you're sick, or what your illness is, only that you took a day off. Another thing is when you request emails, the Attorney General has made it pretty clear that anything that is of a personal nature is not releasable. So if you send your wife an email and say, can you pick up milk on your way home today? That's not something that's going to be released in an FOA request, because it is of a personal nature. And the general rule with FOIs is you want the public to have anything that would be of public concern releasable. It's not the public's concern that, Joe at sanitation asked his wife to pick up milk on the way home.
Right.
That's just not really something. And the Attorney General said we don't have to release it. I mean, I think we're very good within the city at releasing things. We don't hold a lot back unless there's a really good reason to not release it. And we have to be careful. I think the other part that I think a lot of people don't realize is if we release something that's not supposed to be, we can be sued for that.
Right.
And I think people only think of it as we're holding things back, but we also run the risk of being sued if we release something we're not supposed to.
So it's always a little delicate, and FOI is always a little delicate, even if it seems simple.
Right, and the other thing I think, the one we did just recently where there was over 500 emails. Mm-hmm. If I'm doing that request, there's not a piece of that email, any of the emails released, that I didn't look at first, whether it's an attachment or it's the email itself within it. Every bit of that gets read. I think some people get frustrated things aren't just automatically turned over. But if I'm giving it to them, I'm saying it's releasable. And Carol does the same thing. I mean, she has to look through it all and decide if anything needs to be redacted before it can be released. And it can be very time consuming.
Yes, and it can. But I think having lived in other states, I think Arkansas has a very good sunshine law. That we called it sunshine laws, and it's the public gets a good look at what the city does behind the scenes. And that said, and going back to the previous statement, there is a whole lot of things that you're held legally responsible for, and the way we spend money. You may not even, obviously you don't spend money for your personal use, but what do what can you spend money for in your department? What's the barriers of how much you can spend before you go to city council? All these things are things that you guys have to help out with.
Absolutely, and that's actually can be quite stressful at times, because we don't deal with just one legal issue. There's not one legal field we deal with. We deal with everything. Like when I tell you we have a cemetery question, it could be, hey, we're trying to figure out cemetery plots. They weren't all plotted right. What do we do now? How do we, make this right? To the next day, it may be, hey, we've got this. Do we need to bid for this? Do we not have to bid for this? To the next question is an HR question. It is not one type of law we get to deal with. And what I tell people a lot is, a lot of the questions we get asked, there's no solid legal answer for.
Right.
As an attorney, you go to, you look first, is there a law about it? And if there's not a law, you go to case law. Is there case law about it? Has the Court of Appeals or some higher court made a decision about this? And oftentimes that's not there, which leaves us in a position to we got to figure out what makes the most sense given the other legal knowledge we have in this particular situation.
Knowing that a judge or an attorney general could set a precedent based on whatever you do.
Right, you never know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And scary.
Yeah, it's very scary. It's cool for me to watch you be scared. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I guess now you also have a lot to do with council meetings, and what type of surprises can come up during council meetings?
I'm really lucky that Carol does most of the council meetings as her position as the elected city attorney.
And
every
she's
now
got experience. She's got more experience with that.
She does.
But you have done it.
Yes. Every now and then Carol gets sick or, God forbid, takes a vacation or something, and I'm left alone, and I get to do a council meeting. And at first, I'll admit, it was pretty scary because you never know what somebody's going to ask you. You've got not only people from the audience, but the council themselves, and you're expected to have an answer right then and there. So the first few times I was nervous, actually really embarrassing. I think the second city council meeting I covered, I read the wrong ordinance. Like, I'd skipped down and read it, and somebody had to
Nice.
poke me and go, "Hey, you read the wrong one." And I was mortified, right? The rest of the meeting, mortified. But
you read it well.
right, I read it correctly, just it was the wrong one.
Yeah, well,
it happens.
details.
So since then, it's gotten a little better. I've covered some since then, and you just get used to it. And I'm never afraid to say, I'll get back to you on that when I get asked a question. But a common question at council meetings is going to be votes and how votes work, because some things take 2/3 vote. Some things take just a majority vote. Do you have a quorum? Did that pass? Did that not pass? And I know Carol gets a lot of that, and that's always kind of, I always try and reread some of that before I go in, knowing that could be a problem. And another good thing about our office is Carol's really good at communicating any issues with what's going on in the office. So I've covered before and been asked a question about a case I really didn't have a lot of contact with because Carol was dealing with it, but was able to answer because we communicate so well in our office that I was able to answer that question. So those are always the surprise questions are always the stressful part of council meetings.
Very good. Well, Jessica, tell us a little bit about you. What made you choose this field? I mean, you're a smart young woman. You could have chosen something
That actually made money?
well. I think you make probably pretty good money. I don't know. I'm sure it's public record. I haven't looked it up, but
I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I started undergrad at Williams Baptist College in Walnut Ridge, finished at Arkansas State. I was a history major, and I knew I didn't want to teach school. My mom had done that for years. Not that I don't think that's a great job. I just knew I didn't have the patience for it because it takes a special person to be able to do that every day. And I don't think I have that ability. So I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had a teacher that pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally I signed up to take the LSAT, which is the entrance exam for law school. I signed up the last day possible to take the last LSAT I could before graduation to get into law school. And I had a teacher, Professor Sanders, she's still at Arkansas State University teaching, and without her, I wouldn't have went to law school. She really pushed me and encouraged me.
it's cool.
And I'm glad because I really feel like it's what I was made to do. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't have a big draw to it. I didn't feel necessarily led to it, but I think it was exactly where I was supposed to be. So I went to law school in Little Rock, moved back to Jonesboro in August of 2015. I'd wanted to get back for a time. I'd went to college here. I had friends and family here, and I really wanted to get back to the area. And finally, the position came open with Carol's office, and I jumped to take it. It was a great opportunity. I actually was a prosecutor right before this job in Lonoke County, and prosecuted felony and misdemeanor domestic violence cases prior to coming here.
So your personality, what do you consider yourself more of a defense type or a prosecutor type? I'm trying to judge myself, and I'm keeping my thoughts to myself.
Well, if you ask the defense attorneys in town, they would for sure tell you I'm a prosecutor. I don't think they would doubt to tell you that, and I do think that's true. I was a public defender for a time in Little Rock prior to the prosecutor job in Lonoke, and there just came a period in time where I knew I needed to switch. It was time. We need defense attorneys. I think they're a very integral part of our criminal justice system. It wasn't what I needed to do anymore.
So when I want one, don't call you?
Right. Exactly.
I feel like I should. I feel like I could.
Well, you could call me as a friend, but I don't know that I'd be helpful. I could recommend someone.
You could
Right.
point me in the right direction.
Right.
Good. Jessica, thank you for talking with us on Let's Talk Jonesboro.
Thanks for having me.